Allah. Okay, start. إن الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له وأشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له وأشهد أن محمدا عبده ورسوله صلى الله عليه وسلم تسليما مزيدا. اللهم لا سهل إلا ما جعلته سهلا وأنت تجعل الحزن إذا شئت سهلا. اللهم اجعل عملنا كله صالحا ولوجهك خالصا ولا تجعل لأحد فيه شيئا. This is week 2 of the 10-week course dealing with the short surahs of the Qur'an. Last week we looked at Surah Al-Qari'ah and we began with Surah Al-Adiyat. And so, inshallah, we'd like to continue with Surah Al-Adiyat. But before we do that, we'd like to look at some of the study guide questions from last week and try to answer them. It's always good practice after a class, immediately after a class, if you're able to review. That's the best time to review. Some say within 24 hours. Usually the best time is right after class to sit just a few moments and review the notes that you've taken, and then try to make time one other time throughout the week, some other time in the week, to review the notes again, and that way you keep it. And the more a person puts breaks between the material and tries to force their mind to recall it, then the more it will, the easier it will be to keep it. Yeah? طيب. So the first question is, what are two themes of Surah Al-Qari'ah? Two themes of Surah Al-Qari'ah. What were two themes we mentioned? Two things this surah talks about. Talks about the Day of Judgment, the terrors of the Day of Judgment, and salvation. The way of salvation. And first, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala frightens us. And we said that fear is a important motivator in people's lives. People are afraid of being poor. They're afraid of being hungry. They're afraid of missing out. They'll do anything and everything to avoid what they fear. People will spend huge amounts of money because they're afraid of some type of catastrophe. No, that's why every time there's a threat of a winter storm, people run out to the market, and buy up stuff, right? No. What is the purpose of the first 5 ayat? Al-Qari'ah, mal-Qari'ah, wa ma adraka mal-Qari'ah, yawma yakunu an-nasu kal-farash al-mabthuth, wa takunu al-jibalu kal-ihni al-manfush. What's the purpose of these first 5 ayat? We got two themes here. To tell us about the Day of Judgment and to make us afraid of the Day of Judgment by telling us how things will be different. First, by asking questions about this day and its name, and that the idea that this day is going to strike terror in the hearts, or it's going to strike terror in the ears of a person. It's going to reach that person's heart. and then how things will be on that day. People, no matter how many there are, they're going to be afraid, and no one's going to be helping or supporting anyone. Everyone's going to be running away from each other like tiny locusts, baby locusts that are just flying in disarray. And those things that are strong and mighty, those things that are powerful in this world, they're going to become weak and helpless. And the things, the strength that a person finds now, he's not going to find that same strength on the day of judgment. Now, and so the first 5 ayat, they instill fear in a person's heart. When he understands why Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala named this day Al-Qari'ah, and when he understands what things are going to be like on that day. What is meant by heavy scales? The heavy scale is the scale with good deeds. As for evil deeds, they don't have any weight, but they can remove the effect of the good deeds. Now, and we said that what makes a deed good? If it's accepted. What makes it accepted? Mutaba'a niyya. Al-ikhlas wal-mutaba'a. That you do what you do for Allah, and you do it in accordance with the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ, or at least you make sure that you're not opposing. You're not opposing the sunnah of the Prophet ﷺ in the way you do something. Sometimes there's not always text for how to do something, but the Prophet ﷺ clarified how we don't do certain things. And so making sure that we don't oppose the commands of the Prophet ﷺ. What is meant by light scales? Those that do not have good deeds, those that have evil deeds. Now, and it's important to understand that again, in order for a deed to be good, it has to have what? Sincerity and following the Prophet ﷺ. Sincerity and adherence. If it doesn't have adherence, if a person is worshiping Allah in a way that the Prophet ﷺ has not legislated, it's an evil deed. It's evil. It's not good. And if a person is doing an act of worship for other than Allah, prayer, charity, fasting, if he's doing it for anything other than Allah, it's an evil deed. It's an evil deed. And so it's not just what you do, but as we learn in the first hadith, the hadith of Imam an-Nawawi, إِنَّمَا الْأَعْمَالُ بِالنِّيَّاتِ وَإِنَّمَا لِكُلِّ امْرِئٍ مَا نَوَىٰ, that everybody's doing a deed for some reason, and that reason is how that deed is going to be judged, and that reason is going to be how a person is going to be rewarded. What are 2 explanations of the statement Ummuhu Hawiyah? What does it mean, Ummuhu Hawiyah? What are 2 translations or interpretations of His head. Ratsihi, his head. Very good. And his head being Hawiyah means what? Yahweh. He's going to be falling head first into hell on his head. That he's going to be falling into hell head first on his head. And again, a person hears these punishments, and a person, might ask and question, how can a merciful God punish people in such a way? Because they said they didn't want his mercy. So how does this company fire this employee? Because he didn't want a job. He didn't want to work for the job. So if he's left on the streets, he doesn't have a place to stay, doesn't have anything to eat. If the employer tried to be good to him and tried to give him a good position, and he chose not to show up on time, not to do the job he was supposed to do, to play around, to misuse his position, then if he goes out on the streets, if his situation becomes terrible, whose fault is it? His fault. And so Allah is merciful. And our lives in this dunya are a testimony to His mercy. And the fact that He sent messengers and people besides messengers, those who seek knowledge and study knowledge, to remind the people and to call the people and to be patient, to require them to be patient with the harm that people give them. Why? For the sake of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. That it can't be personal anymore. If a person's in da'wah, then he has to learn not to take things personally, because he's calling to Allah. And the example that we've given of that before is like a person in a shop. If you are an employee inside of a store and you are selling goods to customers, then it doesn't matter how those customers act. Doesn't matter what kind of horrible things they say to you. You have to do what? You got to suck it up and keep good character. Why? For the business. The business is more important than you. Right? That's the idea. You're just an employee. We got to keep money on the food on the table. So it doesn't matter what people say to you. You got to suck it up for the business. That's how we have to be when it comes to Islam. Why? For the sake of Allah. Because we're calling people to Allah and we're trying to sell them Islam to save their lives. We're trying to sell them Islam to save their lives as Allah has commanded us to. And so if after that sacrifice and after all of those clear signs a person rejects Islam, then he's what? He's chosen punishment for himself. And an individual lives in this world, eats, drinks, enjoys himself, and not one day did he say thank you. Not one day did he say thank you. And a person has parents, his parents look after him, feed him, clothe him, house him, put up with him, and he treats them like garbage, and he's real nice to the neighbors. You ask the neighbors about him, he's a wonderful boy, mashallah. He's always over here taking out the nice things for us. But you ask his parents, like we never see him, he never calls us, never takes care of us, never asks about us. Is he a good human being? No, no matter how good he is to the neighbors. Why? Because his parents have a greater right to that. And so the nicest person in this dunya, who leaves off his duty to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, is not a nice person. Because he's forgotten his duty to the one that he owes the duty to most. The one that feeds him. The one that sends rain down upon his head. The one that causes the trees and the fruits and things to grow. And the one he raises his pitiful hands to when life beats him up. God help me. God save me. God please, don't let this happen to me. You call on him, and then when he saves you, then you forget him again. He deserves exactly what he gets. Allah gave him plenty of opportunities. And so when we see Allah describe the terrors of what will happen to people, we feel no remorse inside, because we know what? They deserved it. And if someone murdered numerous people and then he gets killed as a result of that, do you feel any pain in your heart for that? No. If you have certainty that what he did was a crime and it was horrible and ugly, there's no remorse. I have no pity for him. He did it to himself. What about those people who he harmed? A person that neglects his duty to Allah, who lives here boasting and bragging about what he does and what he has, and never thanked Allah a day in his life, even though he calls upon him. What does he deserve after that? No. The other explanation of his being Hawiyah is what? His place of return, his place of comfort, his solace is going to be Hawiyah. And what do we say Hawiyah refers to? It's another name for Jahannam because of its depth, because of how deep it is, because of its deep. And we showed the connection between Qara'a and Hawa and so on. Now, so that's what we reviewed, that's what we went over. Well, those are the study guide questions as it relates to Surah Al-Qari'ah. As for Al-Adiyat, number 5, what is a major theme of Surah Al-Adiyat? Horses, huh? Allahu Akbar. What else?
The fact that the horse will do for mankind without asking.
The horse does for mankind. Day or night. Pushes himself to his limits. Good. And then right after Allah describes the horses, what does he say? Man is ungrateful. Gratitude. Surah Al-Adiyat is about gratitude. Allah shows us in this animal, in this dumb animal, and he doesn't speak, dumb, yeah? He shows us in this animal what it means to be grateful and dutiful, what it means to be loyal, what it means to be committed. And if this animal does this with no real sense like a human being, then why doesn't a human being do it as well? So gratitude through the example of horses and what they give to their master. What animal is referenced in the first 5 ayat? Horses. And what situation is being described. Fighting in the cause of Allah. And it might be broader than that. It might just be the use of horses for purposes of war. Why? Because the Qur'an was sent down to all of humanity. And so the idea of it being specific to the Muslims, and it may be broader than that. Because all of the people during that time used horses in warfare. And so they were very familiar with horses and their habits and whatnot. In what two ways does this animal remind mankind of the concept of gratitude? I think our brother mentioned it, that he gives everything for his master and that he's willing to give it day and night. Now, so we'll just return back to the tafsir. So we said, وَالْعَادِيَاتِ ضَبْحًا. We said adiyat refers to what? The horses that run full speed. The horses that run full speed. And we said ضَبْحًا refers to what? Not power.
Or is it the breathing sound?
The breathing. That's the sound of the breath, of the breathing of the horse as he's running full speed like that. And we said, as the Sheikh mentioned, that indicates that it's not just a horse, but there's also a rider there to hear that sound. And you hear the idea, you hear that horse is giving you all that it has, because you hear it breathing so hard. Then we said, فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا. فَالْمُورِيَاتِ قَدْحًا. We said, by the ones who ignite fire with their hooves. The ones that ignite fire with their hooves, indicating what? That they're running so fast and so hard that when their hooves hit the ground, the hard rock, it creates sparks. And we saw that these sparks could be seen when? At nighttime. Right. So they're giving you everything that they've got, and you can see that effort at the night from the sparks that come from their hooves. He says, فَالْمُغِيرَاتِ صُبْحًا. Al-Mughirat, al-Ighara is what? To attack. To attack the enemy. Al-Ighara is to attack the enemy by surprise. And Subha is what? The morning. And by those horses that attack the enemy in the morning. And they don't say, oh, I'm tired, give me a couple more minutes, hit the snooze alarm like we do when it's time for Fajr, right? You want to get up in the morning and ride the horse? He's ready in the morning. You want to ride him in the evening? Ride him in the evening. He doesn't give excuses as to why he can't do it. No. And so he's ready to attack the enemy even in the early morning. So day and night, giving you all that he's got. No. He says, فَأَثَرْنَا بِهِ نَقْعًا. And so he casts up and throws up. Naq'a. What's naq'a? Dust, right. And we said naq'a refers to dust. The name naq'a is because it's settled. And so this dust is settled, everything's peaceful and calmed, and then the horses come in with their hooves and throw all of that up in the air. Just like the riders on their backs are about to cause chaos in the place where they're coming. فَوَسَطْنَ بِهِ جَمَعًا. And they're ready to do what? To ride right into the middle of the enemy lines. To put themselves in danger for the master on their back. Allah swears by these wonderful, beautiful creatures and how much they give for those who own them. And we also mentioned as well that horses are two types. That any of those that are used for war were two types. There were those who had been thinned out and slimmed down to be faster runners. Those who had been thinned out and trimmed down to be faster runners. And how was that done? They would be fed a whole lot initially to kind of bulk them up. And then they would be put in a small room, covered up to kind of sweat it out. To sweat it out. They would be sweated out. And then they would be given less food over time until they became thin and lean. If you have the, I've placed on the table, or Brother Qasim placed on the table for us, we have benefits we're going to be going over for Surah Al-Qari'ah and Surah Al-Adiyat today, inshallah. So if you have that, it says benefits, should say benefits, from Surah Al-Qari'ah wa Surah Al-Adiyat. At the very bottom is the hadith that's referenced there. It says the Prophet ﷺ, arranged for a horse race amongst the horses that had been made lean, yani the ones that had been trimmed down for racing, to take place between Al-Hafya and Thaniyat al-Wada. These are the names of two places, Al-Wada, and the horses which had not been made lean from Athaniya to the mosque of Bani Zurayq. Ibn Umar says, I was amongst those who took part in that horse race. Sufyan ibn Uyayna, the sub-narrator, says, the distance between Al-Hafya and Thaniyat al-Wada is 5 or 6 miles. And between, or mil is a different distance. I'm not sure if it's exactly a mile, but it's 5 or 6. And he said between Thaniyat al-Wada and the mosque of Bani Zurayq was 1 mil. So the horses that had been leaned down were able to run how? 5 or 6 times further at top speed than the horses that had not been trained and leaned down in the same way. The horses that had been trained and leaned down were able to run how? 5 or 6 times faster than the horses that had not been leaned down in the same way. And we said the benefit of that, one of the benefits we gain from that, is the idea that a person is going to give more to his Lord if he what? Lessens his intake of the dunya. Now, if he takes what he needs from the dunya and focuses himself on worshiping Allah and benefiting from his time, he will be more grateful and busy with the worship of Allah. We'll see the opposite coming up. So we'll continue now with the explanation from Shaykh Abdul Razak, hafidhahullah ta'ala. He says, هَذَا هُوَ الْقَسَمِ. He says, this is what Allah has sworn by. Allah has sworn by these horses and given all of these beautiful descriptions. Now in Arabic, whenever Allah swears by something, He's swearing by it for a purpose. There's something He wants to tell you, and He's swearing, just like we would swear, Wallahi, I swear by Allah, because we want to emphasize the truthfulness of what we're saying. And so Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is swearing here by these wonderful animals. He's swearing by them what? To make a point. So whenever you see Allah swearing by something, I swear by the night, I swear by the sun, I swear by the moon, I swear by the stars. When you see Allah swear by something, then as you read, you're looking for, well, what is he telling me? He's swearing by these things to emphasize something that He wants to tell me. So what does He want to tell me? And as Ibn al-Qayyim mentions, there is going to be a connection between what Allah swears by and what He wants to tell you. And there's a reason why He's specifically swearing by the sun, or swearing by the moon, or swearing by the stars. There's a quality that this created object has that matches what He's talking about, what He wants you to know. And so here He talks about these horses and all that they do for their masters. Why? To indicate to us, to make us feel some sense of shame, we're not willing to give Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala our best and our all. And so He says, أَمَّا الْمُقْسَمْ عَلَيْهِ, as for what Allah swears, the reason why He swears, what He wants to tell us, فَهُوَ بَيَانُ حَالَ الْإِنسَانِ, then it is to explain the condition of mankind. He swears by these animals because He wants to let us know what we're like. After He's described what these horses are like, these that you experience, that you've seen, that you ride on, this is what they're like. Do you agree? Yeah, I agree. This is what you're like. No. He says, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لِرَبِّهِ لَكَنُودٌ. Indeed, man is ungrateful to his Lord. And there are nuances, there's style in the Arabic that you're not going to be able to pick up in English because you don't word things in that way. But the original sentence would be, إِنَّ الْإِنسَانَ لَكَنُودٌ لِرَبِّهِ. Mankind, After you mention mankind, you're going to mention is, the verb here. Then you would have the predicate nominative, which is going to describe, and then you would have the prepositional phrase. That's how English would be ordered. Sometimes what happens in Arabic, though, is Allah will put the preposition first, even though it's supposed to come last. Why? Because He wants you to understand that there's something special about this object of the preposition. Let me put that in English now. Yeah? So, man is ungrateful to his Rabb. Man is ungrateful to his Rabb. That's how the sentence is supposed to read. In Arabic it reads, indeed mankind to his Rabb is ungrateful. Instead of Rabb to his Rabb coming at the end, he puts it in the middle. Why? To show how horrible it is that he's ungrateful. Yani, who is he ungrateful to? He's ungrateful to his Rabb. Well, in order to appreciate this, you have to understand what Rabb means. What does Rabb mean? It refers to Allah. But Allah, and that's a good point, Allah could have used any of his names, any of his qualities in this ayat. He could have said, mankind is to Allah ungrateful. Mankind is to Ar-Rahman ungrateful. Mankind is to the All-Knowing ungrateful. Why specifically did he mention Rabb? Right, because Rabb indicates certain things that show that there should be some gratitude here. Number one, Rabb means that he is your creator. You would not exist without him. Did you create the horses? No. They do all this for you and you didn't even create them. You can't create them. You can't make an animal like this. You can't make a fly. But these animals do all of this for you, and the one who created you, you don't do anything for him. Is it just that he created you? No. What else? He owns you. You belong to him. You are his property. When that horse doesn't move how you want it to move, what do? You hit him. Allahu Akbar. You hit him. Does Allah hit you like that? Does he hit me like that? La. You hit the horse to get what you want out of the horse. Allah afflicts us with difficulties sometimes so that we turn back to him, so that we can better our own selves. But he doesn't give us what we deserve. He doesn't give us what we deserve for our transgression. No. And so we belong to Allah. It's important to understand that. And we don't have a say-so here. We are property. That's not nice it doesn't feel nice to say that sometimes, but that's because we don't understand who Allah is. If we understood Allah and understood his mercy, we wouldn't mind belonging to him. The idea of being owned and controlled by anyone, and on a human level, it doesn't feel good. But that's if you're controlled by a human being and owned by a human being. But if it's Allah, then if you understand who Allah is, that's the beauty of Tawheed. That's the beauty of knowing Allah and worshiping Allah and being a Muslim. Because if you submit yourself willfully to him, you won't be a slave to anybody else. People manipulate you and they pull your strings when you think they have some control of your life. People manipulate us and pull our strings when we think they have some control over our lives. They know they don't have any control over our lives. And we know that, and we don't know. But when a person accepts Islam, then he says, what? Allah, you are the only one who controls my life, and you are the one that I willfully submit to. Once that happens, death is not fearful to you anymore. Illness is not fearful to you anymore. Poverty is not fearful to you anymore. Why? Because you know these things are in Allah's hands. You got to do what you got to do. You got to work, you got to provide, you got to strive, you got to take medicine, you got to do different things. But Allah is the only one in control of my life. No matter what you say, no matter what you do, you don't control anything for me. You fire me, I'll find a job someplace else. What are you going to do to protect yourself? The doctor tells me I got 5 months to live. Do you control your own life? Do you know how long you got to live? No. So what are you going to tell me? But it's because we don't know who Allah is. That's when other people evoke fear in our hearts. No. And so Allah is our creator. He is our owner. And He's who else? Our caretaker, our sustainer. He's the one you call to when the world beats you up. He's the one when the doctor gives you the bad diagnosis. You raise your hands and say, oh Allah, please don't let me die like this. Oh Allah, please give me another chance. When your child is sick, He's the one you call on. When you realize that no one else can help you, then that's who you call on. That's who every human being calls on. And so after all of this, He owned you, He created you, He takes care of you. After all of this, you're ungrateful. Innal insana li rabbihi. Rabbihi is mentioned here for a purpose. Why? To show you why you're supposed to be grateful. No. He says, Kanud, the Shaykh says, Huwa al-jahid li-ni'ma. He is the one who refuses to acknowledge the blessings. فَهَذَا حَالُ الْإِنسَانِ عُمُومًا. And this is people's situation in general. يَتَفَضَّلُ عَلَيْهِ رَبُّهُ بِأَنْوَاعِ النِّعَمِ وَصُنُوفِ الْمِنَنِ. Allah gives him all types of blessings and favors. فَيَكُونَ كَنُودًا جَاحِدًا لِنِعْمَةِ اللَّهِ. And after all those favors and all of that goodness, he refuses to acknowledge the goodness that Allah has shown to him. مُمْسِكًا شَحِيحًا. He's stingy and ungiving. بَخِيلًا. Miserly. لَا يُنْفِقْ وَلَا يَبْذُلُ مِمَّا أَتَاهُ اللَّهِ. He's stingy and does not give from what Allah has blessed him with. Of strength, of health, of youth, and of money. Not just what you spend in terms of money. What you spend in terms of your life. What you spend in terms of your talents. What you spend in terms of your knowledge. Do you give any of that for Allah? إِلَّا مَنْ سَلَّمَهُ اللَّهُ وَنَجَّاهُ. Except for those whom Allah saves and keeps safe. Yani through Islam. Some of the scholars of Tafsir said, يَعُدُّ الْمَصَائِبُ وَيَنْسَى النِّعَمِ. Anytime something bad happens, he remembers that. But he can't remember anything good. Every time something bad happens, he remembers that. But he can't remember the good times, the good things that Allah has done for him. And to make sure that we take the matter seriously. The Prophet ﷺ one day, he gave a talk to the women. Their own talk on the day of Eid. And he told them to صَدَّقْنَا فَإِنَّ كُنَّ أَكْثَرُ حَطَبِ جَهَنَّمْ. He said, give charity because most of you, yani most women, will be from the inhabitants of hell. Yani, the inhabitants of hell, the people in hell will be more women than men. So one of the women got up and she didn't say, oh, you're a chauvinist. Why are you talking about women and not talking about the men? She said, what? Why? Lima ya Rasulullah. What's the reason? Because she affirmed that what he said was based upon revelation. It wasn't him just saying things. She said, why ya Rasulullah? قال تكثرنا الشكاه وتكفرنا العشير. Because you complain a lot and you're ungrateful to your husbands. In another narration, he said, takfurna. Yani, you're ungrateful. But when they heard takfurna, kufr, they said, yani, nakfur billah, yani, kufr billah, yani, we disbelieve in Allah. He said, takfurna al-ashir, that you're ungrateful to your husbands. Or takfurna al-ihsan, and that you're ungrateful to goodness. And then he went on to describe that if your husband was good to you all of your life, and then you saw one thing from him that made you unhappy, that you would say, مَا رَأَيْتُ مِنْكَ خَيْرًا قَطْ. I never saw any good from you. What's the point here? The point is that a woman in Islam is taken care of by her husband. The husband is responsible for her home, for her food, for her clothing, for the bills. The husband takes care of his wife, all of her needs. If she has a job and she makes money, that's her money. As for you, as the husband, you're responsible for her financially. And so because you take care of her and maintain her and look after her, and you are the one that Allah has blessed to do that, then a part of that is what? Being grateful. And ingratitude to her husband is really ingratitude to Allah. Ingratitude to her husband is really ingratitude to Allah. Because Allah blessed her with this man as a provider, as one who looks after her. Now, if the guy's a deadbeat, that's a different case. But if the man's taking care of her and looking after her, taking care of her needs, then that means that if there's something he does that's not to her liking, that she doesn't forget every day that he provides for her, that he takes care of her, that he looks after her, and focus on the one thing that he did incorrectly. And similarly, men have to make sure that they're not the same way with their Lord. That we don't focus on the negative things that happen in our lives and forget that we woke up healthy. We forget we got a roof over our heads. We forget that we're comfortable. We forget that we're Muslim. We forget that Allah has blessed us to give importance to knowledge and to prayer and those things that will give us salvation on the day of judgment. That we have Muslim families, Muslim children, who Allah has blessed to learn about Islam and for us to teach about Islam. These are blessings. Allah has blessed our children to have good health. Allah has blessed us to be able to choose in the morning what we eat for breakfast, what we eat for lunch, what we eat for dinner. These are things that we sometimes take for granted, that we often take for granted. And ingratitude is a reason. The reason for me mentioning that hadith is why? Because ingratitude is a reason for what? Going to hell. The Prophet ﷺ said, I see most of you going to hell. And women are the majority of people in hell. Because they're women? La. Not because they're women. Because what? The ingratitude that most of them show to their husbands who take care of them. And so ingratitude is the illah, is the cause, is the reason. And so a believer has to be concerned about that quality of ingratitude. Now, he says after that, وَإِنَّهُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ لَشَهِيدٌ. وَإِنَّهُ أي الإنسان, and indeed he, mankind, على ذلك لشهيد, that he is a witness against himself, that he is ungrateful. بهذه الصفة الذميمة والخصلة المشينة. He is a witness against himself for this disgraceful, lowly, horrible quality that he has, that he is ungrateful. Ingratitude is a horrible quality. And so we strive to be more grateful. And from the du'as of the Prophet ﷺ that he taught one of the Sahaba that he loves, that he loved Mu'adh ibn Jabal. He said, Inni la uhibbaka ya Mu'adh. I love you, Mu'adh. La tada'anna an taqula fi duburi kulli salat. Don't ever forget to say at the end of each prayer, Allahumma a'inni. Oh Allah, assist me, help me, support me. Ala dhikrika wa ala shukrika wa ala husni ibadatik. In being grateful to you, in remembering you, being grateful to you, and worshiping you well. And so a person realizes that in order to be grateful, that he needs what? Allah's help. Most people are ungrateful. This is the way people are. Zaluman jahul, ignorant and oppressive. And so in order to be freed from this ugly quality, then we need Allah's help. We ask Allah for His help to be grateful. And so he is a witness against himself to his ingratitude. For who is shahidun? No, that's not the kalam of the Shaykh. And he is ungrateful based upon what? His statements and his actions. His ingratitude is shown how? In what he says and what he does. Yes. I was going to mention that next. Now, the other opinion of the scholars of Tafsir is that innahu, because it says innahu, verily he. And is he talking about mankind, or is he talking about his Lord? Inna al-insana li rabbihi lakanud. Mankind is ungrateful to his Lord. Wa innahu, and verily he, who? Mankind or his Lord? And that in English is called a dangling modifier. We have a pronoun, we don't know what it refers to. Right? And so the scholars of Tafsir say it can refer to people, And that's what Sheikh Abdul Razak saw as the most appropriate tafsir. And that's what several of the scholars lean to, because the next ayat refers to mankind as well. Because the next ayat refers to mankind as well. Others say no, innahu refers to Allah. Yani that Allah is a witness to man's ingratitude. Yani, what does that mean, he's a witness? He sees it. Doesn't Allah see everything? So we have to be more specific here. If this means that Allah is a witness to it, then that has another implication. And because Allah is a witness to everything. So why is he mentioning that he's a witness to this specifically?
It's like saying, I remember that.
You're not going to get away with it. You're not going to get away with it. You're ungrateful. And I know you're ungrateful. Don't think you're going to get away with it. وَإِنَّهُ عَلَى ذَلِكَ لَشَهِيدٌ. Yani this quality of Allah being a witness is mentioned for a purpose, because Allah witnesses everything. Allah sees everything that happens in the sea, in the sky, underneath the ground. So what's the specific reason for mentioning that he's a witness to this? Yani he's a witness, and you're going to be called to account for your ingratitude. You're not going to get away with being ungrateful. No, because gratitude is Islam. Gratitude is Islam. Islam, a part of what Islam is about, someone asks you, what is Islam about? About being grateful. It's about recognizing that Allah does everything for you, and that every blessing that you have is from Him, and so showing your duty to Him out of gratitude for that. No. He says, وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ. And verily he, due to his, and verily he, for his love of wealth, is strong. Or verily he has a strong love for wealth. So here khair refers to wealth. Here khair refers to wealth. And sometimes in the Qur'an, khair refers to wealth. In the ayat in Surah Al-Baqarah pertaining to al-wasiyah, the will and final testament, Allah says, كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمْ إِذَا حَضَرَ أَحَدَكُمُ الْمَوْتِ إِن تَرَكَ خَيْرًا الْوَصِيَّةِ. It has been prescribed that if death, yani if you're on your deathbed, then, and you have wealth, وَتَرَكَ خَيْرًا, and you're going to leave money, khayr, he called it khayr here, yani al-wasiyah, that you make a will. Now, and so here khayr is talking about khayr dunyawi, yani khayr on a dunya level. But it's not going to be khayr for a person if he doesn't what? If he doesn't show gratitude with it. And wealth is oftentimes the reason why a person will not be grateful. Wealth, yani people who are rich are usually the least grateful. Why? Because they don't feel like they need anything. When you feel like you need something, it's easy to be appreciative. When you feel like you got everything, it's very hard to recognize goodness and appreciate it, because I don't need it, I got it already. No. And that's why one of the things that will help us to be better in our prayer is to recognize our need for guidance. That we ask Allah for guidance, that we're not, just because we're Muslim now doesn't mean we're going to die that way. And so recognizing that we need Allah to stay Muslim. Because many people enter Islam, but many people also leave it. Leave it. And they were practicing and in the masjid all the time, and some of them memorized Qur'an. And they left Islam. And so a person realizes that he needs Allah to guide him. And because of that, he stays humble and he stays appreciative. Every day he wakes up a Muslim. Every day he comes to the masjid. Every day he prays. Every day he does some act of worship to save his soul. He's thankful to Allah that Allah blessed him to do these actions. Now, he says, لَشَدِيد, yani he's severe in his love for wealth. نَفْسُهُ لَا تَقْنَعُ مَهْمَا أُوتِيَ مِنْ مَالٍ. He's never satisfied no matter how much money he has. يُحِبُّ الْمَالِ حُبًّا جَمًّا. He loves wealth a whole lot. أي حُبًّا شَدِيدًا. Yani he loves it yani intensely. لو أوتي من المال واديا لتمنى أن يكون له واد آخر. If he had a valley, if he had a house full of money, he would want what? he won't even more. No. And some of the scholars of Tafsir say, وَإِنَّهُ لِحُبِّ الْخَيْرِ لَشَدِيدٌ, that he is, because of his love of wealth, shadid yani bakhil. That because he loves money so much, he's what? He's stingy. He doesn't give. And remember, being bakhil is not just being bakhil with money. It's also being bakhil with what? With actions, with doing. This horse gives you everything. But what do you give to your Lord? And as Allah says in the Qur'an, وَمَنْ يَبْخَلْ فَإِنَّمَا يَبْخَلْ عَنْ نَفْسِهِ. Whoever's stingy is only stingy really with himself. Why?
Because we do for us.
Right, because Allah doesn't need what we have. Allah doesn't need these prayers. Allah doesn't need your charity. If you don't give sadaqah, it's going to come from someplace else. If you don't give that person in need, Allah's going to make sure they get what they get. It was already decreed when he was in the womb of his mother, 4 months old, that he was going to get what he was supposed to get. So don't think your little simple dollars are going to change the world. When Allah gives you a chance to do goodness, that's what it is. It's a chance for you. As for that person who asks you, Allah already decreed they're going to get it. From you, from somebody else, they're going to get it. So we don't need to feel like we're doing something special when we do good. Whether Allah has done a favor for us by giving us the opportunity to do good, for giving us the resources to do good, for giving us the success to want to do good. Now, ثم نبه تبارك وتعالى على ما يعين العبد على النجاة من هذه الخصال والسلامة من هذه الصفات. The Shaykh says, and then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, after showing us, Allah's just not going to talk bad about us and tell us what's wrong with us like we do. Yeah, you talked about somebody, you this, you that, you this. La. Allah's telling us these things. Why? Because He's going to tell us the way out. This is what you're supposed to be like. This is what you're like. And this is how you can be better. How can you improve your situation? Now, and so Allah explains what He can do in order to attain salvation from these qualities and to be saved from these attributes and characteristics. قَالَ أَفَلَا يَعْلَمْ. Does not mankind know? إِذَا بُعْثِرَ مَا فِي الْقُبُورِ. When he is cast out from his grave, he says, هَذَا أَمْرٌ جَدِيرٌ. This is an important, critical matter. هَذَا أَمْرٌ جَدِيرٌ بِالْعَبْدِ أَنْ يَكُونُ عَلَى ذِكْرِهِ على ذكر له وعلم به. This is something important for a slave to keep on his mind and to know. وأن هذا الجحود لنعمة الله وهذا الحب للمال والانكباب عليه والانشغال به عما خلق العبد لأجله وأوجد لتحقيقه المآل فيه إلى أن هذا العبد سيموت ثم يبعثر ما في القبور ويقوم الناس من قبورهم للمجازات والمحاسبة. He says, it's critical and important. This is a critical and important matter to know that the slave should be constantly remembering and have knowledge of. That this ingratitude, this neglect, this refusal to acknowledge the blessings of Allah, and this love for wealth. Now, and this love for wealth, and this devotion and dedication to it, and this preoccupation with money from what we were created for and brought here to actualize and fulfill, that the end result of that is that the person is going to die. Then he will be brought out of his grave. And then people will stand from their graves to be rewarded and to be judged. That's what's going to happen. And so what I want to focus on here, and mashallah, Sheikh Tahir is going to go into detail, not about this particular point, but he mentioned last time that he was going to give some importance to this topic. What I want you to notice, he says, does he not know? Does he not know that when he is cast out of his grave and when his chest is reveals everything that it contains, when that's brought out, that his Lord is all aware of him. The means to salvation from a person's stinginess and from a person's ingratitude is what? What does Allah mention here as a person's salvation? Knowledge. أَفَلَا يَعْلَمْ. Does not he know? Know what? Does he not know that he's going to die? And that he's going to be resurrected? And that he's going to be questioned? And that he's going to be rewarded or punished accordingly? Doesn't he know that? Yani knowledge of aqeedah, knowledge of who Allah is, knowledge of your duty to him, and knowledge of what's going to happen when you die. These are what push an individual to do what? To correct his life. And this is not something strange. When you tell your children to work hard in school and to study hard and to devote themselves to an education, why? Why? Then in the future, you're going to get a good job, you be comfortable. You want them to work hard now based on what? What you tell them, what you tell them. They haven't lived it, they haven't experienced it. But you want them to believe you and the reality that you're informing them of that they're going to meet if they don't listen to you. And that's what Allah does for us. He informs us and he tells us what tomorrow is going to be like. And he expects you, because you know it's him, and you know he tells the truth, that you believe him, that it's going to be just like this. And you expect your child to believe this future that you keep telling them about over and over again, even though they've never experienced it. Believe me, if you don't study in school, you're going to be poor. Believe me, if you don't work hard, you're going to regret it. Believe me, if you don't stay out of those streets, you're going to end up in jail or dead somewhere. Believe me, you haven't lived it, but I know better than you. And we expect them to take our words and change their lives. Allah expects you to do the same thing. And he expects me to do the same thing. That you read his words and believe what he's telling you is going to happen in the future. If we expect it for our children, then why shouldn't Allah expect it of us? Who's more truthful, we or Allah? Allah. وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ حَدِيثًا وَمَنْ أَصْدَقُ مِنَ اللَّهِ قِيلًا. Now, and so this is the idea. Ilm, knowledge of the khisal of Iman, knowledge of the different factors of Iman, belief in Allah and the Day of Judgment, belief in the angels, belief in the books, belief in the prophets, belief in Qadr. Knowing these things are what will change our lives. And so it's important for us to study these things. It's important for us to read the Qur'an, not to get our reading out for the day, but to see what Allah is saying about these realities. Why is he repeating them over and over again throughout the Qur'an? Because he wants you to believe it. He wants us to be reminded of these realities, just like we want to remind our children. Now, the Shaykh says, وَحُصِّلَ مَا فِي الصُّدُورِ أي يُحَصَّلُ فِي ذَلِكَ الْيَوْمِ مَنْ تَوَتْ عَلَيْهِ لِيُجَازَ الْعَبْدِ. He says, on that day, what the heart concealed will be brought out, it will be retrieved, it will be collected, so that the slave can be rewarded or compensated عَلَى مَا كَانَ عَلَيْهِ مِنْ شُحٍ وَبُخْلٍ وَكُنُودٍ, so that he can be rewarding according to his stinginess and his miserliness and his ingratitude, وَغَيْرِ ذَلِكَ مِنَ الْخِصَالِ الذَّمِيمَةِ, so that he can be rewarded, and other than those of dispraiseworthy qualities. إِنَّ رَبَّهُمْ بِهِمْ يَوْمَئِذٍ لَخَبِيرٌ. Yani their Lord is on that day about them all aware. Yani he is watching. مُطَّلِعٌ عَلَىٰ أَعْمَالِهِمْ الظَّاهِرَةِ وَالْبَاطِنَةِ. He is watching them, their actions openly and secretly. Yani their actions that they do on the outside and the actions that they do on the inside. Because ingratitude And stinginess come from where? The heart. The heart. And so it's important that we understand actions are not just what you do, but they're also what your heart does. Not just what you do with your hands, not just what you say on your tongue, but also what you do with your heart. Now, وهو العليم ببواطن الأمور وخفايا الأشياء كعلمه بظاهرها وعلمها. And he knows the hidden secret things just as he knows those things that are open and are apparent. And again, why is he telling us at the end of this ayat that he is aware of what we do? Because that he's going to remember. And he's going to do what? Call us to account. Yani Allah's khabir of everything. Why is he letting you know that he knows what's going on the inside and the outside? Because you're going to be held accountable for that. No. And so I didn't get to the fawaid, Allahumma musta'an. So we'll be bringing these up inshallah next week. But we have them just before we come back next week. Please look over them and see if you can match them up to the different things that we've talked about. But alhamdulillah, Allah bless us to at least be able to finish the surah. And so inshallah next week, if Allah blesses us with another week, then we will look at the benefits of Surah Al-Qari'ah and Surah Al-Adiyat. And then inshallah we'll be able to take something of Surah Al-Zalzala. Alhamdulillah, subhanahu wa bihamdik, ashhadu an la ilaha illa anta, astaghfiruka wa atubu ilayk. Wa sallallahu ala nabiyyina Muhammad wa alihi wa sahbihi wa sallam taslima kathira.